Guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Neighbor Landlocked My Property, I Couldn't Access My Land. I sue him, he loses everything. Hello everyone. My story takes place in South Africa, where my mother-in-law had inherited a beautiful piece of land. The land and property were right next to a well-known lake, and ever since my mother-in-law, Mill, got the house, she would always invite over all of the family kids and they would spend the day swimming, barbecuing, and having fun. My husband remembers these memories from his teenage years, not that long ago. We are in our mid-20s. And it has always been the hangout spot in the family, if you will. In order to get the house on the property, you have to drive through another person's land. However, the old couple that lived there for years and years, were extremely polite about this, and did not mind letting us drive through their yard. However, when the wife passed away, the old husband had to be put in a nursing home and the property went up for sale. So of course, after this, some douchebag bought it and bought the land the property was on as well. We will keep calling this guy, douchebag, because that is exactly what he was. Immediately after buying the land, douchebag tells my mill and my husband's family that they are not allowed access to the property anymore because they have to drive through his land to get to it. My husband, who is exceedingly kind and does not like confrontation at all, had tried explaining how important this house was to the family. Douchebag said he did not care, that he did not want anyone driving on his easement to access the property. My husband even offered to pay a yearly fee or something to be able to drive on the easement to access the property. But unfortunately, douchebag was adamant about not letting anyone in. At this point in the story, I would like to mention that this was a small town, or village of some sort. Everyone knew each other, and my husband's family were pretty well known in the community as cattle ranchers. They had a good reputation as a good wholesome family, so in other words, it's not like this guy had any reason to think that my husband's family would tear up his lawn or damage his property or anything like that. Anyways, flash forward a little bit and we get to the emotional part of the story. My husband's uncle was diagnosed with a fatal disease a couple of more prior to this. His dying wish was to be cremated and have his ashes spread in the property that he loved so much and had so many memories on. Of course, we were all anxious because we did not even know if douchebag would let us access the property to do so. I mean, you would think that one might make an exception, but this guy was coming off as a major douchebag. Very reluctantly, he let us access the property to do so. It is crazy to me that even in an emotional time like this, he still wanted to hem and haw about my husband's family and I accessing the property to spread my MIL's brother's ashes. However, he did let us. So, we were happy. Until the day came, we were going to spread his ashes. In my husband's family, they have a prayer ritual that they perform when they are burying someone. Even though the circumstances were a little bit different in this case, they still wanted to honor the tradition they so much believed in. Except, when they were getting ready to start the prayer, something caught their eye, and sure enough, douchebag was standing on the property line watching them. What the hell? He could not even give them the privacy and respect they deserved while they were saying goodbye to a loved one. Of course, my husband nor did any of his relatives say anything. They were good people, sometimes too kind, and besides that, douchebag owned the only feed store in town. Because many of my husband's relatives were cattle ranchers, they did not want to burn bridges and have their source of feed for their cattle taken away. Anyways, about a month or so after this, my mother-in-law surveys a land plot around douchebag's land because it went up for sale. She does end up buying it, because she notices through the land survey that there was a way she could access her property through it. So not only was she doubling her land size, but she was also able to come and go as she pleased to the beloved property. She ends up buying a couple of more pieces of land around the area and allowed my husband to build our home on one of said pieces of land. Now, the house was under our name, but technically she owned the land. So if anything, such a renovations or construction had to be done and it would affect the land, she would have to approve and sign for it. Our house was on the outskirts of the populated parts of the town, so we were not a part of the sewage system. Because of this, we had our own septic tank, which to be honest, we liked it better because it saved us money anyway. However, one day we came home, and we saw signs that indicated the commissioner's court would be installing and hooking up this area to the sewage system. We were not happy about this. Obviously, we knew that my mill did not approve because she would have told us. We called her and she was absolutely livid. The land was going to be ruined with jackhammering, construction, trucks, etc. We had no idea how this got approved without my mill consent or signature, so we decided to do some investigating. And guess who was the contractor for this project? That is right, douchebag. When I told my mill, she was furious and ended up going to the commissioner's court. They could not even give her half-assed answer on how this project got this far without her consent, and thus, an emergency meeting was formed. The proposal to get my MIL's land connected to the sewage system was denied. They were allowed to implement sewage systems to the rest of the area, as long as they were nowhere near the property. So not only did douchebag lose his job, but the city also lost thousands of dollars trying to reconfigure the system. Douchebag still lives in the property next to my MILs, but no longer speaks to them. Not that they're complaining obviously. It is also worth mentioning that my husband has brought over some cattle so they can start a mini ranch on my MIL's property. Oh, and some hogs. Some sheep. Either way, it's by the fence line, and I am sure D-Bag enjoys the smell. The next story is titled, Make a Mess of My Car. Get messy yourself. I was on my way home after a very long day working at the hospital. As much as I would have rather just kept driving, the gaslight blazing away on my dash told me to stop being lazy and just fill the tank. After hopping off the highway, I head for the small station I frequently use. It only has 2 pumps, both sides, so 4 spots. Even though it has great prices, I rarely have to wait more than a car or 2 for an open spot. Other than the station, the road is pretty much empty nearby. The station was on my side of the road, so I turned on my right-hand directional. As I begin to turn the wheel into the station, this lunatic in a Mercedes, coming from the other direction, sliced through the out lane and inches across my front bumper to beat me into the parking lot. I slammed on my brakes, sending my gym bag and a stack of folders shooting off the passenger seat into jumbled mess on the floor. I am not a big swearer, but that had me cussing like a sailor. As I pulled in, I noticed a police car in a parking spot outside the building that houses the cashier and the tiny convenience store. My hopes rose as I prayed the officer saw the crazy lady's stunt and I was about to witness instant karma. No such luck. Sigh. She pulled to one side of the pumps. I pulled to the other. I got out, swiped my card, and started the gas flowing. Then, clear as a bell, I hear the snottiest sounding voice issuing from the Mercedes. This is unbelievable. I was clearly here first, but this idiot is filling up the other car first. No, he hasn't even started me yet. I swear these people are stupid as duck out here. Hold on, Shelley. I have to deal with this moron or I will be here all day. Now the dreaded, excuse me, is aimed right at me. You know you don't need to wait for the tank to be full before you start another car? Now come here and take this. She said, waggling a credit card at me. If I am late because of you, I will be calling your boss. And just so you know, it is very rude to service customers out of order. I was here ahead of that guy. I looked down and sure enough she has a New Jersey license plate. In NJ, you don't pump your own gas, an attendant does it for you. My state may have a few full service stations left, but honestly I haven't seen one in ages. Here you pump for yourself. If she had gotten out of her car she would have seen I was that guy, but the pump blocked her line of sight. I considered an "I don't work here lady" style response, but the primped up entitled expression on this self-absorbed bee required more from me. She stared harder at me, raising her brows and waggled the card even more emphatically, before I knew what to do. I let go of my pump, stepped closer and took the card from her manicured fingers. As she sneered at me, I looked her right in the eyes and snapped my hand downward, flinging her card straight into the trash barrel beside the pump. Someone must have thrown a slushie or milkshake in there, because the card made an awesome splat sound when it hit the bottom. The harpy shrill screech that ensued made the thought of sorting out all the files on the floor of my car almost worth it. It could have stopped there and I would have happily driven away with my half-full tank, but it was not over yet. She was screaming obscenities at me as I turned away, broiling out the Mercedes in her designer outfit, completely losing her mind. That was when the officer came dashing out of the store. "Excuse me miss, are you alright? What is going on? This man assaulted me and stole my card. He threw it in there." She says, stabbing a 3-inch long nail at the barrel. Is that correct, sir? Barely. She insisted, and I mean insisted, I take her card. Since I am under no obligation to provide her service with the card, nor did I want it, I disposed of it in the most expedient manner available to me. I replied, gesturing at the wonderful trash receptacle myself. That was a pretty petty thing too. I think you should get it for her, the officer decreed. The NJB was beaming with smug malice at that. I will under one condition. You detain us both, then go look at the store's parking lot camera. Once you see how we entered the lot, you can decide who goes dumpster diving. He raised a brow at me but says, fine. He takes our licenses and tells us to both to wait there. She is a bit perplexed at first, but her natural entitlement must have convinced her she has to be in the right. It is not long before she began to hiss a handful of pretty vile threats at me. I ignored her and finished filling my tank. My passive smiling confidence must have unnerved her eventually. She crept back into the driver's seat and began talking about lawyers with Shelley. About 20 minutes later, the officer returned. He handed me back my license and told me I'm free to go. Before New Jersey can get a word out, he very sternly rounds on her and said, registration, ma'am. That made cleaning up her mess totally worth it. The next story is titled, The Misadventures of Self-Appointed HOA Police. Hello Reddit, let me tell you 2 stories about my Karen neighbor. But first some background. So the community that I live in is a couple of buildings made up of townhouses. Each set of buildings has its own parking area, except for the last building which includes the visitor parking. This will be important. Our community was made up of fairly older people, retirement age, and just recently families and younger people started moving in, such as my husband and I. Now prior to this story I volunteered for the HOA. It's pretty easy since we only meet twice a year and just relay information to the property manager about any issues. On to the story. Being on the HOA, we didn't see a lot of problems until mid-2021 when our property manager stopped doing repairs, and 2 members of the HOA moved. We reached out to the other residents to see if anyone wanted to join. Our neighbor who we are friends with joined and then Karen volunteered. I hadn't met her in person but over the Zoom meeting during the pandemic. Her voice was very distinct. You could smell the cigarette smoke leaking through your speakers with every raspy word. She didn't so much as volunteer but demanded to be on the HOA, because no one was doing anything around here. The first police report from her came after our new property manager sent an introduction email to the HOA. I have never received so many emails in one day from someone before, and they were all complaints. Since she lived in the last building, she took note of everyone that had used the visitor parking. Our bylaws state that visitors can use the spot for 24 hours or park on the street, and residents aren't supposed to use the visitor parking. She sent pictures of people's cars demanding to know who parked there. Worse was she started demanding that all residents must share their registration with her or she would call a tow truck for any unfamiliar car she saw in the community. We shut her down pretty quickly since residents aren't legally obligated to do that. Instead we put up signs that said visitors can be towed at own expense after 24 hours. She was quiet until there was sadly a death in the community. One day I get a text from our friendly neighbor asking if I knew what was happening. I was confused since I was home, so I asked what was happening. The buildings in front of ours had 2 police cars and an ambulance. That's when I noticed the barrage of emails from our police officer. Apparently one of the tenants had died. He was only in his early 30s too. But these emails were not, "Oh, it's so tragic. He was so young. We should send flowers." These emails were speculation and disrespect. She said, it was gang-related, he was doing drugs. I talked to the officers and they said it was foul play and there was illegal activity. At least 20 emails saying how our community property value downhill because of these tenants, and that she was demanding a police report. I told her not to speculate and spread rumors because then she would be the reason for the loss of value. A week later I found out from my coworker, who was friends with the tenant's roommate, that he had a pre-existing heart condition, and had died from a heart attack. I told the board but Karen didn't believe me and kept insisting that it had to be drug-related. The rest of the board and the property management listened to me and told her to stop bad-mouthing the tenants while they were in mourning. The last story is entitled X Claims Officer's Discount Card. This entitled woman walked into my restaurant in 1986. Being the manager of a national pizza chain with a famous red roof afforded me my opportunity to take her down one small peg. This national chain gifted local police with a 50% discount card in an effort to keep a police presence in the restaurant, and police make good word-of-mouth advertisements. After taking over management of this store in 1985, I went out of my way to befriend every policing agency in the area. One lonely mid-afternoon, my area manager, AM, was passing by to see about 9 police cars from the local, county, and 2 state agencies park catawampus in my lot because I know not to tell police how to park. Fearing something was wrong, he rushed to the counter wanting to know the problem. Why all the police cars? Nothing, they're eating lunch together. About a year later, one police officer came in with his 2 elementary children for dinner in the evening. I saw his bill and wondered why he didn't use the police discount and asked. He refused to talk about it in front of the children but came in the next day while on duty. He explained his wife claimed the discount card in the divorce and he doesn't have it anymore. Do you want it back? I asked. Not really, it will cause more trouble than it is worth. Here is the problem, stated with authority. The card only goes to the officer. However, I will let family members use it. Since she is no longer family, I can get into trouble for letting her use it. So, whether you want it back or not, I still have to confiscate it the next time she comes in. I don't know if his ex was entitled all the time, but the next time she came to use the card, she definitely showed how she thought the world revolved around her. Me. Ma'am, I will let you use the card this time, but I have to confiscate it because you are no longer married to the officer. Entitled X. No, I won the card in the divorce. It is mine. Me. As you see here at the bottom of the card, it reads, property of pizza chain. Entitled X. I don't care what it says, give it back. As her face appears if I passed gas. Me. No, I cannot do that. Thank you for your business. Entitled X called the police on me. Another officer showed up and I explained the policy of using the cards. Then I showed him the pizza chain retains ownership of the card and the local manager dictates who uses the card. He told her there was nothing he could do for her. She screamed police brotherhood and stormed out without the discount card. Entitled X called my new AM and she phoned me the next day. I read the policy to her regarding the cards and explained the purpose for them as she was not familiar with them. She wanted me to tell the other managers about the cards at our next management meeting. She agreed she didn't like taking the card from a single mother, but it was policy. I offered the card to the officer, but he mentioned he was taking up a new position in his hometown because he wanted to get out of our small town. I didn't see him again after that last meeting. I saw Entitled X around town a few times, but she didn't recognize me outside of pizza chain. Thank you for listening.